The sound of laughter cut through the classroom like shattered glass. 11-year-old Edgar Thompson stood frozen at the front of room 23, his eyes fixed on the floor as Ms. Patterson circled him like a predator. "Class, is this how we present ourselves?" she asked, pinching Edgar's faded shirt between her manicured fingers as if touching something contaminated. "Is this how we show respect for our learning environment?" A few students snickered. Others looked away uncomfortably. Only Olivia Ramirez watched with growing anger, her hands clenched into tight fists beneath her desk. What Miss Patterson didn't know was that Edgar's father, Bill, had been washing clothes in their bathtub since their washing machine broke 3 weeks ago. What she couldn't see was how hard Edgar's dad worked. 2 jobs, endless hours, just to keep a roof over their heads and medicine in Edgar's inhaler. And what Miss Patterson could never have imagined was who Bill Thompson really was, or what would happen when he finally walked into her classroom for the parent-teacher conference that would change everything. Sometimes, those who judge others the most harshly are due for the harshest. The hallways of Westridge Elementary were bustling with children rushing to their classrooms as the first bell rang. Among them was Edgar Thompson, an 11-year-old with bright eyes that contrasted with his worn, faded clothes. Edgar clutched his backpack tightly against his chest, trying to hide the fraying straps that threatened to give way at any moment. "Just make it through today," Edgar whispered to himself as he approached room 23, Ms. Patterson's 5th-grade classroom. His stomach knotted as he hesitated at the doorway. Ms. Diane Patterson stood at the front of the classroom, her posture impeccable in her crisp beige dress and matching cardigan. At 42, she had been teaching at Westridge for 15 years, and in that time, she had developed a reputation for 2 things: excellent test scores and an unwavering adherence to standards. Her classroom walls were adorned with motivational posters about excellence, achievement, and proper behavior. Edgar slipped into the classroom, hoping to reach his desk unnoticed. But Ms. Patterson's sharp eyes missed nothing. "Edgar Thompson," she called out, her voice cutting through the morning chatter. The room fell silent. "You're nearly late." "Again." "Sorry, Ms. Patterson," Edgar mumbled, sliding into his seat in the back row. He kept his head down, focusing on the scratched surface of his desk. "Class, today we're continuing our unit on personal responsibility," Ms. Patterson announced, writing the words on the whiteboard in her perfect cursive. "Who can remind us what we discussed yesterday about presenting our best selves to the world?" Several hands shot up. Ms. Patterson pointed to Veronica Wells, daughter of the school board president. "We talked about how our appearance shows respect for ourselves and others," Veronica answered confidently, tossing her perfectly braided hair. "Excellent, Veronica. Appearance matters. It reflects character." Ms. Patterson's eyes drifted toward Edgar, who was attempting to take notes with a pencil stub. Some of us seem to have forgotten that lesson. The class followed her gaze. A few students snickered. Edgar sank lower in his seat. His navy blue shirt, once his favorite, had a small stain near the collar that hadn't come out when his dad tried to wash it in the bathroom sink. Their washing machine had broken down 3 weeks ago, and Bill Thompson was still saving for repairs while working double shifts. "Edgar," Ms. Patterson's voice sharpened. "Stand up, please." The classroom went completely silent. Edgar froze, his heart pounding against his ribs. "Edgar, I won't ask again." Slowly, Edgar pushed back his chair and stood, his eyes fixed on the floor. "Class, look at Edgar's presentation today." Ms. Patterson walked toward him, her heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum floor. "Notice the unwashed shirt, the stained collar, the wrinkled pants. Is this how we show respect for ourselves and our learning environment?" "No, Ms. Patterson," several students chorused automatically. Tears burned behind Edgar's eyes, but he blinked them back furiously. Crying would only make it worse. "This is the 3rd day this week you've come to school looking like this," Ms. Patterson continued, circling him like a hawk. She reached out and pinched the fabric of his sleeve between her manicured fingers, lifting it slightly as if it were contaminated. "Do you not have clean clothes at home, Edgar?" Edgar's voice disappeared. The truth was too humiliating to share, that his dad had been washing their essential clothes in the bathtub, that they were hanging them to dry in their small apartment bathroom. That money was so tight after Edgar's asthma medication costs increased. "I asked you a question," Ms. Patterson pressed. "My dad, he works late," Edgar managed to say, his voice barely audible. In the second row, Olivia Ramirez watched the scene unfold with growing discomfort. Unlike most of her classmates who stared with morbid fascination or averted their eyes entirely, Olivia's expression hardened with each of Ms. Patterson's words. "Working late is no excuse for poor hygiene," Ms. Patterson declared. "My husband works 60-hour weeks as a financial advisor, and our daughters never look disheveled." The classroom door opened suddenly, and Principal Hayes stepped in with a clipboard. "Good morning, Ms. Patterson. Just doing my morning rounds." Ms. Patterson's demeanor shifted instantly. "Good morning, Dr. Hayes. We're just discussing personal responsibility." Edgar took the momentary distraction to sit down, his hands trembling beneath his desk. Principal Hayes nodded approvingly at the lesson title on the board and left after a brief exchange about an upcoming staff meeting. "Now, open your textbooks to page 47, Ms. Patterson instructed, smoothly transitioning as if nothing had happened. Edgar fumbled with his backpack, only to realize with horror that he'd left his textbook at home. It had been on the kitchen table where he'd been studying late last night while waiting for his dad to return from his evening shift at the hospital. "Is there a problem, Edgar?" Ms. Patterson's voice cut through his panic. "I forgot my textbook," he admitted quietly. Ms. Patterson sighed dramatically. "First, you can't be bothered to dress properly, and now you're unprepared for learning. Class, this is exactly the opposite of personal responsibility." A few students laughed. Someone in the back whispered, "Maybe he can't afford books either." "Share with Olivia," Ms. Patterson directed, pointing to the empty seat beside the girl with dark curly hair and determined eyes. Edgar gathered his things and moved to the vacant desk, keeping his eyes down as he slid into the seat. "Here," Olivia whispered, pushing her book between them. "We can share." "Thanks," Edgar mumbled, acutely aware of the contrast between his frayed sleeve and Olivia's clean purple sweater. The morning dragged on painfully. Every time Edgar looked up, he caught classmates stealing glances at him, some pitying, others amused. By lunch period, rumors had spread throughout the 5th grade. As Edgar walked to the cafeteria, he heard whispers about the boy with no clean clothes, and does he even have running water? The cafeteria was a battlefield of social hierarchies that Edgar usually navigated by making himself invisible. Today, invisibility was impossible. He sat alone at the end of a table, unwrapping the sandwich his dad had carefully prepared at 5 a.m. before leaving for his first shift. "This spot taken?" Edgar looked up to see Olivia standing there with her lunch tray. "No," he said, surprised. Olivia sat down across from him. Ms. Patterson was way out of line today. Edgar shrugged, not trusting his voice. "She does that sometimes," Olivia continued, opening her milk carton. "Last year, she made Leo Russell cry because his science project wasn't aesthetically pleasing enough. My mom complained to the principal, but nothing happened." "It's fine," Edgar said automatically, the response he'd been programmed to give whenever things were decidedly not fine. "It's not," Olivia insisted. "My abuela says people who pick on others have the ugliest souls." Despite everything, Edgar felt the smallest smile tug at his lips. In the afternoon, Edgar endured math and science, subjects he usually excelled in. Today, he couldn't focus. Every time Ms. Patterson walked near his desk, he tensed up, waiting for another humiliating comment. During science, as they worked on group projects about ecosystems, Edgar noticed Ms. Patterson showing particular attention to the groups with children of influential parents. The PTA president's son, the school donor's daughter, and Veronica Wells. "Ms. Patterson, I don't understand this part." Edgar raised his hand during the independent work period, referring to a diagram they were supposed to complete. "I explained it thoroughly, Edgar. Perhaps if you paid as much attention to instructions as you clearly don't to your appearance, you wouldn't be confused," she replied loudly enough for nearby students to hear. The final bell couldn't come soon enough. As students packed up their belongings, Ms. Patterson handed out permission slips for an upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. "Remember, these need to be signed and returned with the $20 fee by Friday," she announced. Edgar stared at the paper, knowing there was no way his dad could spare $20 this week. Not with the washing machine repairs, not with the electric bill due, and certainly not with Edgar's medication refill needed next week. "Also," Ms. Patterson added, "parent-teacher conferences are next Monday. The sign-up sheet is by the door. Make sure your parents know it's mandatory." Edgar's stomach dropped further. His dad would have to take time off work to attend. Time off meant lost wages they desperately needed. As students filed out, Edgar lingered, gathering his courage. "Ms. Patterson?" He approached her desk tentatively. "Yes, Edgar?" she replied without looking up from her planner. About the field trip. I don't think I can. If you're going to tell me you can't afford it, the school has limited financial assistance available, she interrupted, her tone making it clear what she thought of such requests. Although it tends to go to students who demonstrate effort in all areas of school life. The implication was clear. Edgar swallowed hard. Thank you, he said quietly, turning to leave. And Edgar? Ms. Patterson called after him. Do try to come in clean clothes tomorrow. It's disruptive to the learning environment when students don't maintain basic standards. Edgar nodded and walked out, clutching the field trip form so tightly it crumpled in his grip. In the hallway, the fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, the chatter of other kids too loud. He made it to the boys' bathroom, just in time to lock himself in a stall before the tears finally broke free. He allowed himself exactly 2 minutes to cry. He'd counted it out before. Then wiped his face with rough paper towels and splashed cold water on his reddened eyes. Outside, most students had already left. Edgar began the walk home to the small apartment he shared with his dad in the Cedar Grove complex, about a mile from school. As he walked, he rehearsed what he would tell his dad about the parent-teacher conference. Maybe he could say it wasn't mandatory after all. Maybe he could forge the signature on the field trip form and find a way to earn the $20 himself. But Edgar knew, as the apartment building came into view, that he wouldn't lie to his dad. Bill Thompson had worked too hard, sacrificed too much for Edgar to repay him with dishonesty. His dad would find a way. He always did. What Edgar didn't know was that tomorrow would change everything. For him, for his dad, and especially for Ms. Patterson. Edgar woke up to the sound of his father moving quietly around their small kitchen. Through the thin wall that separated his bedroom from the main living space, he could hear the familiar routine. The coffee maker gurgling, bread being placed in their second-hand toaster, the gentle thud of his dad's work boots as he moved about preparing their breakfast. "Dad!" Edgar called out, his voice still thick with sleep. "What time is it?" Bill Thompson appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his light blue maintenance uniform. At 38, his face showed the weathering of a man who had shouldered heavy burdens alone. Laugh lines around his eyes hinted at his natural good humor, though they were increasingly overshadowed by the deeper grooves of worry that had formed since Edgar's mother passed away 3 years ago. "It's early, buddy. Just past 6. Bill's smile was warm despite the exhaustion evident in his posture. "I've got to head to the hospital for an early shift. Mrs. Grayson next door said she'll make sure you get to school on time." Edgar sat up, memories of yesterday flooding back. The thought of returning to Ms. Patterson's classroom made his stomach clench painfully. "Dad, I don't feel so good. Maybe I could stay home today." Bill approached, placing a calloused hand on Edgar's forehead. "No fever. What's wrong? Stomach hurt? Headache?" The concern in his father's eyes made Edgar feel guilty. He couldn't add more worry to his dad's already heavy load. "Just tired, I guess," Edgar mumbled. Bill studied his son, sensing there was more. "Did something happen at school yesterday?" Edgar looked down at his worn blanket, picking at a loose thread. "Ms. Patterson, she said some stuff about my clothes. In front of everyone. She said they were dirty, and that it was disrespectful." Bill's expression darkened, his jaw tightening momentarily before he carefully composed himself. "Your clothes were clean, Edgar. Maybe not brand new, but clean. I washed them myself." "I know, Dad. But the washing in the sink doesn't get stuff really clean. And there was still that stain on my blue shirt." Bill sat heavily on the edge of the bed, the frame creaking under his weight. "I'm sorry, buddy. The repairman says he can fix our washing machine this weekend. I've been saving up. Just a few more days." Edgar nodded, feeling worse for bringing it up. "Hey." Bill gently lifted Edgar's chin. "Don't you worry about what people like Ms. Patterson think. We're doing our best, and there's honor in that. Your mom would be proud of how brave you've been." The mention of his mother brought both comfort and a renewed ache. Edgar missed her steady presence, her unwavering belief in both him and his father. "There's a parent-teacher conference on Monday," Edgar said quietly, handing over the crumpled notice from his backpack. "And a field trip that costs $20. Bill took the papers, his expression unreadable as he scanned them. "I'll be there on Monday, and you'll go on that field trip." "But Dad, your work." "I'll handle it." Bill's tone was final but gentle. "Now get dressed. I made your favorite breakfast, cinnamon toast." As they ate breakfast together, Bill outlined his plan for the day. "I've got the early shift at Central Hospital until 3, then I'm heading straight to Jackson Auto Repair for the evening. I should be home around 9. Edgar nodded, knowing this was their new normal. Since his asthma had worsened, requiring more expensive medication, his father had taken on additional hours at the auto shop where he'd once worked full-time before getting the hospital maintenance job. "I can heat up the leftover spaghetti for dinner," Edgar offered. At 11, he'd become adept at managing household tasks when his father worked late. "That's my responsible boy," Bill said with pride. "But don't forget to do your homework first." After his father left, Edgar got ready for school with a growing sense of dread. He put on his cleanest clothes, a gray t-shirt without any visible stains and his least worn jeans. He tried to flatten his hair with water, wishing they had some of that styling gel he'd seen advertised on TV. Mrs. Grayson, their elderly neighbor who had taken a liking to Edgar, knocked on their door at 7:30 sharp. "Good morning, young man," she greeted with a warm smile that crinkled her entire face. "Ready for school?" Edgar nodded, forcing a smile. Mrs. Grayson had enough troubles of her own. He wouldn't burden her with his. At school, Edgar kept his head down as he made his way to room 23. Just outside the classroom, Olivia intercepted him. "Hey," she said, her voice friendly. "I saved you a seat next to me if you want it." Surprised but grateful, Edgar followed her into the classroom. Ms. Patterson was already at her desk, scrolling through something on her computer with a pinched expression. She glanced up as Edgar entered, her eyes narrowing slightly as she assessed his appearance. "Better," she commented curtly before returning to her screen. It wasn't praise, but at least it wasn't public humiliation. The morning proceeded with relative calm. During history, Ms. Patterson announced an upcoming special visitor to their class. "On Monday, coinciding with our parent-teacher conferences, we'll be hosting a very important guest," she stated, her voice taking on an almost reverential tone. "Dr. Preston from the Westridge Education Foundation will be visiting to evaluate which classroom initiatives deserve additional funding." Her gaze swept across the room. "This is an incredible opportunity for our class. Dr. Preston has considerable influence with the school board and donors. I expect everyone to be on their absolute best behavior." During math, Ms. Patterson handed back their tests from the previous week. Edgar had scored a 92%, one of the highest grades in the class. "Well done," Ms. Patterson said, but her tone lacked the enthusiasm she'd shown when handing back Veronica's 88%. "Though I expect more work shown on problem 7. At lunch, Edgar sat with Olivia again. This time, they were joined by Devin, a cheerful boy from their class who seemed unfazed by social hierarchies. Ms. Patterson was talking about the parent visitor like they're royalty or something. Devin said around a mouthful of ham sandwich. "My mom says Ms. Patterson is always trying to impress the rich parents and donors," Olivia confided. "She thinks it'll help her get promoted to curriculum coordinator." Edgar listened quietly, picking at his lunch. The cafeteria today was serving chicken nuggets, his favorite, but the $20 field trip fee weighed heavily on his mind, diminishing his appetite. "Aren't you eating?" Olivia asked, noticing his full tray. "Not really hungry," Edgar replied. Olivia studied him for a moment before saying, "Is it about the field trip money? Because my mom says the school has to help kids who can't afford it. It's the law or something." Edgar felt his face grow hot. "I can afford it," he said defensively. "My dad's just been busy. He works at Central Hospital." "Really?" Devin perked up. "Is he a doctor?" "No, Edgar hesitated. "He works in maintenance." "That's still important," Olivia said firmly. "My uncle is a janitor at the mall. He says without him, the whole place would fall apart in a week." Edgar smiled gratefully. After lunch, their class had to present projects on community heroes, assignments they'd been working on for the past week. Edgar had completed his project on his father, detailing how Bill worked 2 jobs to support their family while still volunteering twice a month at the community food bank, where they'd once received assistance. As students took turns presenting, Edgar noticed a pattern. Ms. Patterson lavished praise on projects about doctors, lawyers, business executives, and public officials. When Zach presented about his mother, the accountant, Ms. Patterson spent 5 minutes discussing the importance of financial professionals. Then it was Edgar's turn. He walked to the front of the class, poster in hand. He'd spent hours on it, using the colored pencils from last year's school supplies to illustrate his dad in both his hospital uniform and his auto mechanic coveralls. He'd written about how his father taught him that real strength was found in kindness, perseverance, and helping others even when you had little yourself. "My community hero is my dad, Bill Thompson," Edgar began, his voice stronger than he expected. He works as a maintenance worker at Central Hospital and as a mechanic on evenings and weekends. Ms. Patterson's smile tightened slightly. Edgar continued, gaining confidence as he spoke about his father's work ethic and kindness. Even though we don't have a lot, my dad teaches me that what matters most is how you treat people. He says the measure of a person isn't in what they have, but in what they give. He described how his father fixed elderly neighbors' appliances for free, how he'd taught Edgar to change oil in cars, and how Bill always found time to help Edgar with homework despite working 14-hour days. When Edgar finished, there was a moment of appreciative silence before the class began to applaud. Edgar felt a surge of pride. Ms. Patterson cleared her throat. Thank you, Edgar. While manual labor is certainly necessary in our society, I'd hoped this assignment would expose students to the diverse professional opportunities available through education and academic achievement. The classroom fell silent. Edgar stood frozen at the front of the room, his poster suddenly feeling inadequate in his hands. Perhaps next time, Ms. Patterson continued, you might consider researching a figure whose accomplishments extend beyond basic employment. Edgar returned to his seat, his earlier pride crushed. As he sat down, Olivia whispered fiercely, your project was the best one. Ms. Patterson is just being mean because she's a snob. After school, Edgar walked home alone, his community hero poster tucked under his arm. Ms. Patterson's dismissal of his father's hard work had left a hollow feeling in his chest. He knew his dad worked harder than anyone he'd ever met. What did Ms. Patterson know about sacrifice or struggle? When Edgar reached their apartment building, he was surprised to see his father's old truck in the parking lot. Bill was never home this early. Edgar rushed up the stairs and unlocked the door to find his father at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers. Dad, why are you home? Are you sick? Bill looked up, his expression weary but determined. No, buddy, I'm fine. Just had some business to take care of. How was school? Edgar hesitated, not wanting to share Ms. Patterson's comments about his presentation. It was okay, he said finally, setting his backpack down. We presented our community heroes projects. That's the one about me? Bill asked, noticing the poster. Let me see what my artistic son created. Edgar reluctantly handed over the poster, watching his father's face as he examined it. Edgar, this is incredible, Bill said, genuine amazement in his voice. The detail in these drawings, you've got real talent, son. Ms. Patterson didn't think it was very good, Edgar admitted, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. She said I should have picked someone with more important accomplishments. Bill's expression darkened, but he quickly controlled it. Is that so? She said manual labor is necessary, but that we should aspire to more, Edgar continued, the hurt evident in his voice. She makes me feel like we're not good enough, Dad. Bill carefully set the poster down and pulled Edgar into a hug. Listen to me. There is dignity in all honest work. What matters isn't the job title or the paycheck. It's the integrity and care you bring to whatever you do. Edgar nodded against his father's chest, drawing comfort from the familiar smell of motor oil and the hospital's industrial soap. Besides, Bill added with a mysterious smile, things aren't always what they seem. Before Edgar could ask what he meant, Bill changed the subject. How about we order pizza tonight? I got some good news today. Really? What news? I'll tell you soon enough. First, pizza. Then you can tell me more about this Ms. Patterson. As they ate dinner, Edgar gradually shared more about his experiences in Ms. Patterson's class. Her preferential treatment of certain students, her fixation on appearances and status, and her excitement about the Visiting Education Foundation representative. Bill listened intently, asking occasional questions but mostly just letting Edgar talk. When Edgar mentioned the parent-teacher conference coinciding with the foundation visit, Bill's eyes took on an odd gleam. So this Dr. Preston is a big deal to Ms. Patterson? Bill asked casually. Huge deal, Edgar confirmed. She's been reminding us every day to be on our best behavior. Olivia says Ms. Patterson wants to impress them to get promoted. Bill nodded thoughtfully. And the conference is Monday at 4:30? Yeah. But Dad, if you can't make it because of work. Oh, I'll be there, Bill interrupted, a strange determination in his voice. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Later that evening, Edgar was finishing his homework when he heard his father on the phone in the kitchen. Yes, that's right, Bill was saying, his voice low but clear. I'd like to confirm the arrangements for Monday. Yes, the full presentation. No publicity, please. I prefer to keep things low-key. Edgar frowned, puzzled by the conversation. When his father hung up, Edgar called out, "Dad." "Who was that?" Bill appeared in the doorway, seeming slightly startled. "Just work stuff, buddy. Hospital business." Edgar nodded, though something in his father's tone didn't quite match his casual words. But he trusted his dad completely. If Bill wasn't telling him something, he must have a good reason. "Finish your homework?" Bill asked. "Almost. Just one more math problem." "Good. And Edgar? I want you to know something." Bill's expression grew serious. "No matter what anyone says, I'm proud of the person you're becoming. Your mother would be too." Edgar felt a lump form in his throat. "Thanks, Dad. And one more thing," Bill added, a spark of something, mischief? Determination, in his eyes. "Sometimes justice takes time, but it always comes around eventually." With that cryptic statement, Bill returned to the kitchen, leaving Edgar to wonder what exactly his father was planning. The weekend passed quietly. On Saturday, as promised, the repairman came to fix their washing machine. Edgar helped his father do 5 loads of laundry, reveling in the luxury of truly clean clothes again. On Sunday, Bill worked a short shift at the hospital but was home by 3, an unusual treat. They spent the afternoon together, playing basketball at the community court and grilling burgers on their small patio. Not once did Bill mention Ms. Patterson or the upcoming conference, but occasionally Edgar caught his father checking his phone with unusual attention, as if waiting for an important message. As Edgar went to bed Sunday night, he found himself both dreading and curiously anticipating the next day. Something was going to happen, he could feel it. His father had always taught him that honesty and hard work would be rewarded in the end. Maybe tomorrow would finally be the day when Ms. Patterson would see the truth about the Thompson family. What Edgar didn't know was just how dramatically that truth would be revealed. Monday morning arrived with an electric tension in the air. Ms. Patterson's classroom had been transformed overnight. Fresh flowers adorned her desk, student artwork was meticulously arranged on the walls, and a table with refreshments had been set up in the back corner. "Remember, class," Ms. Patterson announced as students settled into their seats. "Dr. Preston from the Westridge Education Foundation will be visiting during our afternoon session. This is our opportunity to showcase the exemplary learning environment we've created here." Edgar noticed she was wearing what appeared to be a new outfit, a tailored navy blue dress with pearl earrings that caught the fluorescent lighting as she moved. "Ms. Patterson really went all out," Olivia whispered as they worked on their morning assignments. "My mom says the foundation has millions of dollars to give to schools." Throughout the day, Ms. Patterson's nerves manifested in increasingly sharp corrections of student behavior. When Devin dropped his pencil during math, she lectured him for disrupting the class. When a student from another class delivered a note from the office, Ms. Patterson criticized how the girl's uniform shirt was untucked. By lunchtime, everyone was walking on eggshells. Even Veronica Wells had been reprimanded for excessive talking during reading group. Edgar managed to stay beneath Ms. Patterson's radar until afternoon science, when she called on him unexpectedly. "Edgar, explain the difference between renewable and non-renewable resources." Edgar, who had been daydreaming about the upcoming parent-teacher conference, froze momentarily. Renewable resources can be replaced or regrown quickly, like solar power or trees. Non-renewable resources take millions of years to form, like coal or oil." Ms. Patterson's expression tightened. A simplistic explanation, but essentially correct. "In the future, please pay closer attention rather than staring out the window." As the final bell approached, Ms. Patterson became increasingly agitated. She repeatedly straightened items on her desk and checked her reflection in her compact mirror. "Before you leave," she announced, "I expect everyone to straighten their areas completely. Parent-teacher conferences begin at 4, and Dr. Preston will be arriving shortly thereafter." The students carefully organized their desks, no one daring to invite Ms. Patterson's criticism. As they filed out, she called out, "Edgar, a moment please." Edgar approached her desk cautiously. "Yes, Ms. Patterson? Your father is confirmed for the 4:30 slot, correct?" Her tone suggested she anticipated disappointment. "Yes, ma'am. He'll be here." "Good. And Edgar?" Her eyes flicked over his clean, neatly pressed shirt, one of the freshly washed clothes from the weekend. "I'm glad to see you've made an effort with your appearance today." Edgar just nodded, unwilling to explain that their washing machine was finally fixed. "Run along now. And remind your father to come through the main entrance. We don't want anyone using the service doors today." The implication was clear, and Edgar felt his cheeks burn. But something in him had changed over the weekend. Perhaps it was his father's quiet confidence, or perhaps it was simply reaching his limit with Ms. Patterson's treatment. My dad knows his way around buildings, Ms. Patterson. He won't get lost. Before she could respond, Edgar turned and walked out, heart hammering at his own boldness. Outside, Edgar found his father already waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck. Bill looked different somehow. His usual maintenance uniform replaced by crisp khaki pants and a blue button-down shirt Edgar had never seen before. "Dad, where's your work clothes?" Bill smiled, a curious light in his eyes. "Took the afternoon off. Special occasion." As they walked toward the school entrance, Edgar noticed his father carried a leather portfolio under his arm. "What's that?" "Just some papers," Bill replied vaguely. School forms and such." In the hallway outside room 23, several parents already waited on the chairs arranged along the wall. Ms. Patterson could be seen through the doorway, speaking animatedly with Veronica Wells's parents. "That's her," Edgar whispered, gesturing toward Ms. Patterson. Bill nodded, his expression unreadable. "I see." When the Wells family exited, Ms. Patterson's smile was radiant. "Such a pleasure discussing Veronica's progress with you both. She's truly thriving." Her eyes swept the waiting area, landing on Edgar and his father. For a split second, her smile faltered as she took in Bill's appearance. Edgar could practically see her recategorizing him from maintenance worker to possibly respectable. "Mr. Thompson? We're ready for you now," she called, her professional smile firmly back in place. As they entered the classroom, Edgar noticed Ms. Patterson's gaze lingering on his father's polished shoes and the quality leather portfolio. "Please have a seat," she gestured to the chairs facing her desk. "I'm Diane Patterson. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Thompson." "Bill, please," his father replied, shaking her hand firmly. "Well, Bill," Ms. Patterson began, settling into her chair, "I've been looking forward to discussing Edgar's progress with you. He's a bright student, though his participation could be more consistent." As she launched into a clearly rehearsed speech about Edgar's academic performance, the classroom door opened. A distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit entered, followed by Principal Hayes. "Excuse me," the principal said. "Ms. Patterson, I apologize for the interruption, but Dr. Preston has arrived and was hoping to observe a conference in progress." Ms. Patterson's eyes widened. She straightened immediately, smoothing her dress. "Of course. What perfect timing. Please, Dr. Preston, join us." The man nodded politely but remained standing near the door. "Please continue as if I weren't here. I'm simply observing the parent engagement process." Ms. Patterson turned back to Bill with renewed enthusiasm. "As I was saying, Edgar shows promise, particularly in mathematics. With proper guidance and perhaps some additional structure at home regarding homework routines." "Before we continue," Bill interrupted gently, "I'd like to address something Edgar told me about his experience in your classroom." Ms. Patterson's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Oh, yes. He mentioned that last week. You singled him out in front of the entire class to criticize his clothing. Called it dirty and disrespectful." The classroom fell silent. Principal Hayes shifted uncomfortably by the door. I assure you, Mr. Thompson, I merely uphold high standards for all students," Ms. Patterson replied, her voice slightly higher than before. "Proper presentation is an important life skill." "Ms. Patterson," Bill's voice remained calm but carried an unmistakable authority. "Our washing machine was broken. I was washing my son's clothes by hand in our bathroom sink between my shifts at the hospital and the auto shop." Ms. Patterson's face flushed. "I understand challenges can arise in certain household situations. However, he also told me," Bill continued, "that you dismissed his Community Heroes project because I work in maintenance and as a mechanic. That you suggested he should aspire to more professional role models." By now, Dr. Preston had moved closer, his interest clearly piqued. "That's not exactly. I simply wanted to expose the children to diverse career paths that require higher education," Ms. Patterson stammered. Bill nodded thoughtfully. "I see. And what made you assume I don't have higher education?" Ms. Patterson blinked rapidly. "Well, your occupation." "Ah," Bill said, opening his portfolio and extracting several documents. "Let me clarify something, Ms. Patterson. I do indeed work in hospital maintenance. I've spent the past 6 months working in every department of Central Hospital, from janitorial to food service to maintenance." He slid a business card across the desk to her. Ms. Patterson picked it up, her confusion evident as she read it silently. "You see," Bill continued, Before I can properly serve as the new hospital administrator, I believe in understanding the operations from the ground up. My predecessor simply managed from his office. I prefer a more hands-on approach. Ms. Patterson's face drained of color as she stared at the card. Hospital administrator? Yes, Bill confirmed. Before that, I was Chief Operations Officer at Memorial Hospital in Pittsburgh. I hold an MBA from Wharton and served as a healthcare management consultant for 7 years. Dr. Preston stepped forward now, extending his hand to Bill. Bill Thompson, I thought you looked familiar. Your reputation precedes you. Your innovative approach to hospital management was featured in Healthcare Executive Quarterly last year. The two men shook hands warmly. You know each other? Ms. Patterson asked weakly. Indeed, Dr. Preston replied. Mr. Thompson is also one of our foundation's most generous donors. His annual contribution funds our scholarship program for underprivileged youth. Edgar stared at his father in amazement. He knew his dad had worked at another hospital before they moved, but he'd never mentioned being in charge. Why didn't you tell me? Edgar whispered. Bill squeezed his son's shoulder. I wanted to earn the respect of every worker at Central before taking the helm. And I didn't want you to be treated differently at school because of my position. I believe everyone deserves the same respect, regardless of their job title. He turned back to Ms. Patterson, whose complexion had now taken on a grayish tinge. Which brings me back to why we're here. My son deserves to be treated with dignity, Ms. Patterson, as does every child in this classroom, regardless of their clothes, their parents' occupations, or their economic circumstances. Principal Hayes stepped forward. Mr. Thompson, I want to assure you that Westridge Elementary values every student equally. If there's been any misunderstanding, it's not a misunderstanding when a teacher publicly humiliates an 11-year-old over circumstances beyond his control, Bill stated firmly. It's not a misunderstanding when she dismisses the value of honest work or judges families based on their perceived social status. Ms. Patterson found her voice at last. Mr. Thompson, I assure you there's been a misinterpretation. I hold all students to high standards because I want them to succeed. Then perhaps, Dr. Preston interjected, you should reconsider what true success looks like. In my experience, it has far more to do with character than with appearances or titles. The room fell silent. Edgar watched Ms. Patterson's carefully constructed world crumbling before his eyes. In light of this situation, Bill said, turning to Principal Hayes, I'd like to announce a new initiative I've been discussing with your superintendent and the school board. Starting next month, Central Hospital will be partnering with Westridge Elementary to establish a community support program, providing resources for students in need. Everything from school supplies to clothing assistance to laundry services for families experiencing hardship. Dr. Preston nodded approvingly. The foundation would be delighted to match the hospital's contribution. Principal Hayes looked stunned but delighted. That's incredibly generous, Mr. Thompson. Additionally, Bill continued, I'd like to establish a dignity and respect curriculum to be implemented across all grade levels, teaching students and staff alike about the value of all work and all workers in our society. Ms. Patterson's lips had disappeared into a thin line. And finally, Bill said, turning directly to Ms. Patterson, I believe this program would benefit from having someone intimately familiar with the school's filing system. Someone detail-oriented with excellent organizational skills. The implication hung in the air. Principal Hayes cleared his throat. Ms. Patterson has indeed demonstrated remarkable attention to detail in her record-keeping. The principal offered cautiously. Perfect, Bill replied. I think she'd be an excellent candidate to coordinate the program's extensive documentation requirements. In the administrative office, Ms. Patterson's mouth opened and closed without sound. As they prepared to leave, Edgar noticed Dr. Preston and Principal Hayes already deep in conversation about the new program. His father placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Ready to go home, buddy? Edgar nodded, still processing everything he'd witnessed. As they walked out, he heard Ms. Patterson call after them. Mr. Thompson, I want to apologize to Edgar. My behavior was inappropriate. Bill paused, turning back. It's not me you need to apologize to, Ms. Patterson. She swallowed hard, then looked directly at Edgar. I'm sorry, Edgar. I was wrong to treat you the way I did. Edgar studied her for a moment, seeing for the first time not an intimidating authority figure, but simply a flawed person who had made poor choices. I accept your apology, he said finally. Outside in the parking lot, Edgar turned to his father. Dad, Why didn't you tell me about being the hospital administrator? Bill smiled ruefully. I wanted to earn it first, son. To understand what every person in that hospital experiences before I presumed to lead them. And honestly, I was enjoying just being your dad, not someone with a fancy title. But all this time you could have. Could have what? Lived in a bigger house? Bought new clothes instead of fixing the washing machine? That's not what matters, Edgar. As they got into the truck, Edgar had one more question. What's going to happen to Ms. Patterson now? Bill started the engine. She'll have a chance to learn and grow, just like we all do. Sometimes the best lessons come from our mistakes. Driving home, Edgar felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Tomorrow, he would walk into school with his head held high, knowing that the true measure of a person had nothing to do with titles or appearances, and everything to do with how they treated others. And that was a lesson Ms. Patterson was just beginning to learn.